morning. So I said to some friends the other night, the reason we're here is really because of Peter and Mimi O'Brien and the fact that Peter, who celebrated their 41st wedding anniversary yesterday, and congratulations to I said this really should be called the O'Brien Forum, and I said because then everyone could get free lunch at O'Brien's down on the Riverwalk. But I also said the great thing about coming to Chicago is that here in Chicago you can get things done. And thanks to all of the support of many of you in this room over the last 5 years, we've got a lot done. We've made Illinois the #1 state in the nation for the strongest parity law in the nation. We've had conferences on the importance of mental health in our education system. We've had conferences on the importance of recognizing the power of mental health to avert our criminal justice challenges. We've talked about the importance of integrating mental health into the healthcare system. We've talked about all of these issues and many more. And today we're gathered to talk about how mental health plays such an important role in the workplace, especially given the fact in the course of our lives we spend more time at work than we frankly spend at home. That's pretty tough to acknowledge. But it is a truth that if we're going to transform the mental health and well-being of all Americans, we need to be able to say that we're going to reach into the workplace, because we cannot leave that unattended. We've got to bring mental health into the education system. We finally got to integrate it into the healthcare system. We got to make sure it's there so that we don't address the criminal justice problems we're addressing because of the neglect of mental health. But the workplace is one of the places that we've really neglected to talk about mental health in a meaningful way and come up with strategies in order to improve the mental well-being of those in the workplace. And today we have an all-star lineup through many panels that will talk about the various plans that are out there to help address mental health in the workplace. And I hope you all will take something from these plans, look at some of those that have been offered, and as far as this Kennedy Forum, we're going to try to not only aggregate all of them, but start to curate them, because we know different workplaces will require different types of interventions. But what we need to do is begin the process of this discussion, and that is what we are doing here today. We have so many honored guests today. I particularly wanted to say what an honor it is for us to have your new mayor. The mayor is here today. I'll tell you, Mayor, if it weren't for Illinois, my uncle wouldn't have been elected president. And I will tell you that there was a story that late in the evening during election eve, when the votes were too close to call, then Senator John F. Kennedy called Mayor Daley, and he said, "How's it going in Chicago?" And he said, it's going all right. How many votes are you going to need to get over the top?" And I don't know if that story is true, but it's a good one nonetheless. But you, on the other hand, as opposed to President Kennedy, who won by the barest of margins, closest election in history besides Bush v. Gore, you, on the other hand, won every single precinct. What a mandate. What a mandate. So we have the Attorney General, the Governor, we have international presidents of organized labor, including the president of the AFL-CIO, presenting today, because labor is going to play a big role in helping us change how health insurers really think about participating in this effort. Let me make one point about why the system is broken today. And that is, health insurance companies make their evaluations on a cost-basis analysis, where they evaluate the outlay for mental health and the return on investment in terms of physical health. And some of them are coming around to that, particularly our good friends, Kaiser Permanente, who we're honored to have here today. But what we're really looking for is them to add a new factor in their equation when considering how much value they get from investing in mental health. What they're neglecting to include in their evaluation is the fact that if they spend more on mental health, they're actually going to help their employer reduce other costs besides medical costs. Those are presenteeism costs. Those are absenteeism costs. Those are worker disability costs. And unfortunately, whether it's a Taft-Hartley plan, or whether it's a third-party administrator for every major company in America, none of them underwrite their policies with that in mind. And corporations in this country and labor unions in this country need to insist that when they sign a document contracting with an insurance company to manage their health benefits, that they tell that insurance company, we expect you to also factor into your cost-benefit analysis the increased value of spending money on mental health because of the ROI that may not just be reflected in the lower physical costs, but will be reflected in the improved worker productivity of a workforce. That needs to be one of the takeaways from today, and I'm sure you're going to hear it from many of the folks that are going to be presenting to you today. But let me just say, isn't this the most beautiful room you could imagine sitting in all day? I also want to acknowledge the person that allows me to be able to do all of this, and that is my wife, Amy Kennedy. Amy, could you please stand? Come on, stand up. Stand up. Amy's a public school teacher, 14 years, NEA member, and knows that her children in the classroom are suffering, and there's very little for her to be able to do as a teacher other than to discipline them, which is not the way we need to respond to our children's mental health needs. She has been leading many efforts to bring social and emotional learning, which is a cause that I know is very important here in Chicago, because it's been demonstrated to reduce the kinds of scores and standardized tests that have gone down, and what we can do with social emotional learning is raise those scores, because when kids are able to mediate stress in their lives and understand coping mechanisms, they perform better in school and perform better in life. And I have to think within the next 5 years, social emotional learning is going to be a mandate in every single public school in every part of this country if we do what we know works. And I might add, my cousin Tim Shriver started Center for Social Emotional Learning, and they're going to have a convention out here in October about that, so look for Castle if you're interested in that. But teachers are under a lot of stress, as are firefighters, as are police officers, as are every single person that gets up every morning and goes to work. The only person that doesn't have any stress is the next person I'm about to introduce, Pastor Harris. Because every time I see Pastor Harris, he is glowing, kind of like the day that we're in today. And he's so positive. He brings the message of God through his very example and that of his church, helping those that are the least ones among us. Pastor Harris, thank you for being here today.
If you're glad to be alive today, make some noise all over this room, everybody. Would you please stand on your feet? I'm going to ask you to, every time they invite me to come, I ask you to grab the hands of your neighbor. The only thing I'll ask you to do differently today is make sure you hold the hand of somebody better looking than you are. I understand the 3 people over there that wouldn't touch anybody. I understand. Must be the best looking person in the room. And today I want you to understand that as you grab that hand of that neighbor, you need to know that you're literally touching a walking miracle. And today you're going to hear a lot of talking, but let's take a few moments as we begin today to take time to talk to God. As you bow your heads, our Father and our God, this is the day that you have made. We rejoice and we're glad in it. In prayer today, we hold our neighbor's hand as if our touch represents your grip of compassion. We thank you for bringing us all to this special day, this day that we have never seen before and a day that we shall never see again. So help us to maximize this moment and make the best of this day. Father, with all that we now know and have learned, we acknowledge that there is so much more for us to learn concerning mental health and how it impacts individuals, families, and communities. Our lack of knowledge and understanding at times have separated us from our sisters and our brothers who are challenged in this regard. Therefore, empower us to draw closer to those we have been assigned and anointed to serve. Father, as we hold our neighbor's hand, we know that they made it here today. But what we do not know is what it took for them to be here today. Every single person hearing the sound of my voice is a survivor. They have all survived their own challenges and even our own choices. And this is only because you have kept us. And for that, we are truly grateful. You said in your word that you would always give us peace of mind. So continue to provide that peace of God that surpasses all understanding. We come today as people of all creeds and faiths, seeking your presence, your comfort, and your guidance. We come as consumers, family members, friends, co-workers, and mental health professionals, and even faith leaders. Give us courage to face our own challenges and open us up today to the many ways that you are already working in our midst. Help us to identify mental health and mental illness as the disease as it is, that we might have the courage and the wisdom to face all of the ignorance and stigma. Bring those challenges to its knees. Inspire us as we seek to overcome fear, acquire knowledge, and advocate for compassionate and enlightened treatment and services. In closing, lead us as we open our hearts and our homes and our communities, our job opportunities, our houses of worship, and communities of faith. Enable us to find ways to be inclusive of persons living with mental illness challenges and mental health concerns in their everyday lives. Be with the doctors, the therapists, the researchers, the social workers, and all those helping these folks in our community who are really our neighbors and family members. Help us to see ourselves when we see them. Give us the ability to submit, to serve, and to love with unlimited compassion those you call your children. And we thank you to be counted amongst those. Now bless this entire forum. Bless the Kennedy Forum institution, all of its leaders, and give vision, which we know is insight, foresight, based on hindsight. In Jesus' name we pray. And if you believe it is done, clap your hands and shout amen.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Pastor Harris, With Pastor Harris's prayers and Patrick's passion, I know this movement will move forward with a great thunder and make a difference in our society. Before I begin, I also want to say thank you to my bride of 41 years, Mimi O'Brien. Mimi, please stand. We have had some trials and tribulations through our marriage, but I must tell you that the luckiest day of my life was the day that I chased her up the elevator at a political event. So thank you, Mimi, for being my partner. My daughter, Megan O'Brien, is with us today. And again, on behalf of Patrick Kennedy and the board of the Kennedy Forum, good morning, welcome, and thank you for attending the 5th convening of the Kennedy Forum here in Chicago, Illinois. As you know, I'm Peter O'Brien, chairman of the Kennedy Forum of Illinois. We begin this annual convening by honoring all of you today for stepping up in extraordinary ways to fight for mental health justice. In the past 5 years, the Kennedy Forum in Illinois has tackled the work of ending stigma and expanding access to mental health and substance use treatment. The work of the Kennedy Forum is supported by a devoted board of directors and advisors and leadership council members numbering 85, both individuals and organizations. These women and men have given invaluable advice, support, and platforms to reach thousands and to organize our efforts. Behind me is a listing of these generous and committed individuals. I ask members of the Board of Directors and Advisors Board and Leadership Council here this morning to stand so that we can acknowledge and thank you. Please stand. The Kennedy Forum, because of all of you, is a force and a movement busting the stigma surrounding mental health issues and opening access to care to treat those issues as health issues. An equal force are those elected officials who have supported this movement to continue the fight against discrimination and to increase access to people living with mental health and substance use disorders. Over the past year, because of you, we have implemented the strongest mental health parity act in the country. We have moved closer to transforming Illinois' mental health treatment system to identify those struggling early in their diagnosis. And we are giving a voice to those who struggle in order to change the system to be fair and equal. I now ask all elected officials to stand and be recognized and thanks for the courage that it takes to make the changes that you've done. Please, all elected officials stand. Mayor, please stand. I especially want to thank Chicago's mayor, our mayor, Mayor Lori Lightfoot, who has joined us this morning. Thank you for being here, Mayor. Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, who will be with us today. Attorney General Kwame Raoul, who will also be with us today. City of Chicago Clerk Anna Valencia. Former Governor of the State of Illinois, Pat Quinn, who's here with us today. Vice Chair of the Kennedy Forum, Illinois, very important title that she holds, Vice Chair of the Kennedy Forum of Illinois, and State Representative, my representative, Sarah Feigenholtz. Sarah, take another bow. And thanks to Governor Pritzker for all of his leadership, and he will be joining us this afternoon and giving us an address later on this afternoon. And a special Chicago welcome to the First Lady of New York City, Charlene McRae, who is with us today, and you'll be hearing from her as well. You are all true heroes of this city, state, and country, and a heartfelt thanks from my family and the Kennedy family for all that you've done and all of us together. Thank you, elected officials, for having the courage. Today is a national convening here in Chicago, and specifically here in a location we call Chicago's Cultural Center. Please allow me a moment to indulge in hometown pride. I'm a lifelong Chicagoan who is proud of our ability and practice to make no small plans. We are a center of commerce, culture, and rich mosaic of ethnicities. Chicagoans are strong and resolved in finding and enacting solutions for our societal problems. The embodiment of this Chicago spirit is found in our new mayor. Mayor Lightfoot is resolved in her advocacy for the work of the community of mental health. As a former assistant United States attorney to leading the Chicago Police Board and Police Accountability Task Force, and now mayor, she gets the challenges inherent to our community. She understands that people, like my late son PJ, deserves treatment over prison, health services over health silence. The mayor has been on the job for less than a month, and she has already laid out a 4-point plan for safety, education, stability, and integrity, promising a new start, new hope, to advance this great city and leave it better, stronger, fairer, and more vibrant than she found it. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce the mayor of Chicago, friend of the Kennedy Forum and consummate advocate for those living with mental health and substance use disorder, the Honorable Mayor Lightfoot.
As I'm speaking and as you think about what you're going to hear over the course of today, I want to pick up on two themes that Pastor Harris said. And one is overcoming our fear. And a lot of the issue and conversation around mental health and illness has to do with that basic thing. Can we overcome our fear to have the necessary conversations and reach into communities that are so desperately in need? And the second thing that he said, which really resonated with me, and is really something that I am going to be striving for in everything that we do, particularly around public policy, is to see ourselves in our neighbors. If we can reach across the divides and see the commonality in each other, there is nothing that we can't accomplish. There's no problem that we can't solve. The talent is everywhere. It's just having the will and the determination, but most importantly, the empathy to see each other in ourselves. So thank you, Peter, for that marvelous introduction, and thank all of you for being here. Now, before I go on, let me just say a few words about Patrick Kennedy. After 8 terms in Congress, Patrick could have done literally anything. But it says something about who he is as a person, that he has chosen to use his experience, his passion, and the power of his family's legacy to make particular differences in people's lives, and particularly the emphasis on mental health and mental well-being. It really says a lot, and we are grateful for his leadership. And people know that I'm a history buff, so I have to throw in a couple historical references. It shouldn't be lost on any of us that Patrick's uncle, President John F. Kennedy, signed in 1963 the first federal mental health legislation in our nation's history. That legislation, the Community Mental Health Act, changed the way we talk about and treat mental illness. Likewise, the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act of 2008 that Patrick Kennedy tirelessly championed nearly a half century later, moved the needle even further in how we think about and treat mental health. There is not a family in America who is not touched by issues related to mental health and mental illness and addiction. This affects all of us in our homes, our workplaces, and in our communities. And yet, because of the stigma that has too long surrounded mental health, it has often been more convenient and expedient to look the other way. Patrick and the Kennedy Forum are helping change that, and we also need to embrace that change ourselves. I want to thank everyone here. I want to let everyone here know that Chicago will be doing its part as well, and that you have a friend and an ally and a champion in City Hall. As I said throughout my campaign, my administration will work to improve our city's mental health system to benefit all Chicagoans. When I am out in neighborhoods, particularly when I'm out on the street at night, talking to young men and women in neighborhoods that are plagued by economic disparity, but also by violence, what I know is that we have an absolute right and obligation to make sure that we're providing the kind of services that are necessary to uplift the quality of life for people in those neighborhoods. It is the most distressing thing as a mother to see young people, young children, where the light is starting to go out because of the level of trauma that they are experiencing every single day as their norm in neighborhoods. We absolutely cannot accept that. We cannot accept that. But we have to lead, and I have to lead, and I am committed to doing just that. We will ensure that members of our community who are suffering from a range of trauma, a range of mental health issues, get the resources and support that they need. And we will be looking beyond the landscape of Chicago's own city clinics. While we need to ensure our clinics are as strong as possible, we also need to examine the entire system within the ecosystem of mental health services to make sure that no one in any neighborhood goes without care because of lack of access to resources. It is a system that includes our community-based health care providers, as well as our hospitals and other private providers. And you know this, many of the people who are involved in this work are in the room today, and we will continue to partner with you. Our mission is to transform that system into one that delivers the best services to people most in need. Across Chicago, we have remarkable, dedicated doctors, nurses, psychologists, social workers, and other professionals serving those of us facing mental health challenges and addiction. This work not only helps patients, it also lifts up businesses, organizations, and entire communities that benefit from a strong mental health social safety net. But we are clearly not where we need to be. Despite there being 250 publicly accessible locations across our city, only half of Chicago's adults who report serious psychological issues say that they are receiving treatment. And we know that's not getting at the broader community of trauma so many people are facing today. Meanwhile, some clinics report long waiting lists, others report none at all. These discrepancies are unacceptable and reflect a system in need of wholesale reexamination and repair. A truly effective healthcare system needs to be collaborative, coordinated, and affordable in order for individuals to be connected to the services that they need when they need them. That is why during my first 100 days in office, I have directed my team to present to me options to increase mental health resources and access for all Chicagoans. Now, we will not be, thank you. We will not be starting with a blank piece of paper because a lot of that work is already being done. We will be drawing upon the resources and expertise and talent of people in this room and across the city and making sure that we're forging a network of real solutions so we can provide care. We will explore the integration of healthcare to serve the whole person, regardless of age, insurance, or income status. We'll examine how to coordinate our city's mental health system by linking more people to existing services. And we will create a plan that is data-driven. Because in order to ensure that the right services are getting to the right people, we need to know exactly what's going on in our communities. And that's done with ongoing assessment to ensure services are continually improved and adjusted to meet the needs of people. We will also be examining how we can fund services to ensure that we have needed flexibility to fill in the system's gaps at any given time. These gaps in psychiatry and severe mental illness treatment, as well as support for victims of gun violence, sexual assault, and formerly incarcerated. Those are all people that are in most need, but we need to make sure that we have a system of care that reaches everyone who needs it. And finally, we will be working with our partners in state government to fund and increase access for effective mental health services. And as I said in my inaugural address just a few weeks ago, we are each other's business. And let me say, we must be each other's business. And standing up for our residents in need, including those in need of mental health treatment, is our business and our calling as a city. I look forward to working with the men and women of the Kennedy Forum, as well as other elected officials, policymakers, and professionals in this room to ensure our vision for mental health becomes a reality for all Chicagoans. And I'll be happy if we come back a year from now and report that we have done our work and that what we have done in Chicago can and should be a model for the nation. I am totally committed to this work, and we will get it done for our citizens, for our employees, for all those in need, particularly our first responders and our children in neighborhoods that are under siege. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Lightfoot. Your love of this city is clear and mutual. All of us in this room feel what you feel, and we are committed to making a difference. It takes great effort and resources to present this annual convening. Please join me in thanking our many sponsors and supporters. I especially want to thank my co-convening chair, Kaiser Permanente, who has joined us as a chief sponsor, and it's no small feat. They are a great company that is committed to their clients and the well-being of all of us. So thank you, Kaiser Permanente, for being a chief sponsor along with Mado Healthcare, my family company. My partners are here today with my daughters and my wife, so thank you. Without these committed and generous individuals and companies, today's incredible program wouldn't be possible. And in addition to the sponsors, we owe a debt of gratitude to the great staff that we have. Cheryl, James, Kara, please stand where you are, and thank you for putting on a tremendous effort. As Patrick mentioned, today is dedicated to workplace well-being, a top priority for business leaders in our current climate of rising rates of stress, burnout, addiction, depression, and suicide across sectors. We are talking solutions. Through this morning's panel and throughout our afternoon sessions and conversations, we ask you to come prepared as a student, to ask questions, challenge the status quo, and consider your own experiences and those of your employees and peers as we navigate the complex and often uncomfortable topic of caring for ourselves and each other at work and beyond. We'll hear from 3 national union presidents, pioneering innovators in healthcare, business leaders at the forefront of mental health advocacy within their companies. And we are thrilled to have NBC journalist Kate Snow as our distinguished host, who along with her husband Chris flew in from New York to join us today. And finally, please join me Please join all of us tonight at the Harris Theater across the street for an evening spotlight session where we'll hear from both Kate and Chris, as well as powerhouse artists and mental health advocates like Elle King, Gina Rodriguez, and more. It is now my honor to introduce today's host, who traveled from New York City yesterday, as I said, but I didn't tell you it was her birthday yesterday. Thank you, Kate, for coming to guide us through this special day. Kate Snow is a weekday anchor for MSNBC Live, an Emmy Award-winning national correspondent for NBC News, and anchor of NBC Nightly News Sunday edition. Kate has traveled the globe, building a reputation for stories that create change. Her 2014 Emmy-nominated series, Hooked, America's Heroin Epidemic, put a human face on a public crisis, promoting legislative action on the issue and praise from drug policy organizations. Just last month, Kate was widely recognized for her compelling, honest piece for Today.com about teens and their vulnerability to stress and mental health issues, opening up about her own struggles raising 2 teens. Kate is married to radio host Chris Bro, a Chicago native himself, and we're happy to have some of Chris's family in our audience today. You can see Kate and Chris take the stage together tonight at the Harris Theater during our Spotlight series. And now, please join me in bringing Kate Snow to the stage.
You guys taking, oh, hi. I was going to say you're taking the podium away. Is that what's going on? All right. Oh, we're getting casual up here. Good morning, everyone. How are you all? At least you didn't, Peter, at least you didn't say which birthday. It's on Twitter. It's my 50th birthday yesterday. There's no secrets anymore, right? It's all on Wikipedia, so you can't hide. Can you guys hear me okay? I kind of feel like Madonna. It's okay? It is really my honor to be here today. Peter, thank you so much. It was a pleasure for us to travel in from New York, not a big deal, because this is such an important day. It is personally important to my husband and I for a lot of reasons. It is important to me as a journalist. I think we are at an incredible moment right now in this movement to try to break the stigma around mental illness and mental health in the workplace and way beyond the workplace. It does feel like we're sort of at a watershed, and I'm inspired that you're all here, right? That there are gatherings like this where we can talk openly about these subjects that really matter. I'm honored to kick the day off. We're going to start with a renowned panel of experts, business leaders, healthcare disruptors, as they try to bring best practices for mental health in the workplace. So I'd like to introduce them, and if you could hold your applause until we're all up here, that would be great. So Christopher Swift is the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the Hartford. There he is. Kelly Nantel is the Vice President of Communication and Advocacy at the National Safety Council. Dr. Mark Friedlander is the Chief Medical Officer of Behavioral Health at Aetna. And Garen Staglin is co-founder and board chairman of One Mind. Please welcome everyone. How you doing? So we're going to kick things off with kind of a broad conversation to set the stage for today about where we are, like what the status is in terms of the workplace and mental health. Dr. Friedlander, I'd like to start with you. What led us to this critical moment that we're at in the workplace?
It's hard to define just one single
Is that
issue.
on? Can you guys get Dr. Friedlander's microphone?
Okay.
Try again.
Okay. It's hard to enumerate just one.
There you are.
It's not just one thing. I think there are a variety of factors, all of which have contributed to greater awareness, greater access, more evidence base for what we need to do. But in many ways, it boils down to what we as a society value. In my opinion, when we take a look at the behavioral health field, and when I talk about behavioral health, I'm meaning addictions, substance use disorders, as well as mental illness. When we take a look at the whole behavioral health landscape, we've seen tremendous change, we've seen tremendous awareness of it's a medical condition now. We've also seen an increasing recognition that it's not just a medical issue, it's a societal issue. There's increasing awareness of the impact that social determinants have on folks, on their well-being, and it's no longer just a question of sick care, it's a question of what can we do to keep people well, how do we help people figure out a way to emphasize their mental health as well as their physical health. Right. We're very aware of the impact that exercise and physical work has had on folks. There are so many wellness programs on the physical medical side. There's so much engagement by folks in taking care of themselves, being aware of smoking, being aware of appropriate diet, being aware of the impact that exercise has. And we're only starting to have an impact on the behavioral health side for those things. People are starting to engage in wellness activities for their psychological well-being, and I think that that's only going to increase.
Yeah. Christopher, I know I've seen a shift at my own company, at NBC Universal, to your point, where there's more emphasis on wellness. There's also, as a parallel track, it was mentioned by Peter that I've done a lot of reporting on substance abuse. Talk about substance abuse and how that fits in with what companies need to be looking at around mental health.
Sure, I'd be happy to. First, it's great to be with you. Happy birthday again.
Thank you.
Welcome to the club.
Not real happy to be in that club.
This is a topic that I'm pretty passionate on from a business side and also for personal reasons. But the Hartford, as a leading workers' compensation and long-term disability provider, I think we have unique insights from data and analytics that really tell a story of a tremendous toll on individuals, families, communities, and society at large. And my message ultimately is this isn't just a public health issue. I mean, it is a business issue dealing with addiction, at least from our perspective. So if we think about the business implications of particularly the opioid crisis that we see, it deals with reduced labor force participation rates. It deals with higher medical costs, absenteeism, more recruiting and turnover, and really loss of productivity. Estimates right now, for 2017 would say it's a $500 billion issue for our U.S. economy. And if you think in the context of a $17 trillion economy, it's 3 to 4%. So it's real and meaningful, problem. So, to me, it's what can we all do, together, to sort of fight it. I would give you just a couple little bit more data points just to make sure the audience is fully grounded, which I know you are. But there were 70,000 deaths from drug abuse in 2017. 30,000 were opioid related. We've done a survey of employers, both large, small, medium size, and we would share the data that says HR representatives feel that their businesses are being impacted by the addiction crisis in a meaningful way, but 30% would say that they're ill prepared and don't really have it a priority to move forward. So I think it's time for all of us, business leaders, communities, healthcare professionals, really to come together and put our resources and put our shoulder into this, and really think in terms of what are really practical solutions going forward.
And I think we're going to hear a lot of agreement up here on this topic. Kelly, you work with the National Safety Council, which people probably think of, I think of it as workplace safety in terms of, not getting hurt on the job physically. But mental health is equally important. What do you find as you survey the landscape?
I think we're seeing the impact of this crisis significantly in workplaces. As Chris said, lost productivity is a piece of it, but even injury and death in the workplace, and particularly companies are reporting having direct impact in the opioid crisis with overdoses in their workplace. So we know it's there, and I think to Chris's point, it's really making the case for business owners to stand up and take notice. And several years ago, we partnered with the organization Shatterproof, along with NORC from the University of Chicago, to create a cost calculator that allows business owners or safety professionals or HR professionals who are recognizing the crisis in their workplace to monetize it. What does it mean to the company in lost productivity and insurance costs, all of those things. And that cost calculator helps to make the safety case for getting engaged on this issue. We know your surveys are terrific, and we did a little bit of a deeper dive just this year. We surveyed 500 HR professionals, safety professionals, and mid and senior level managers because we wanted to see it from all of those perspectives. 75% of them said they know they've been impacted by the opioid crisis. Our cost calculator tells us that number is even greater than 75%. But even that recognition is significant. So we know we've got to give employers resources to help address the crisis.
Garen, it's easy to say we've got a crisis and we need the workplace to respond. Mm-hmm. What's the brass tacks, globally or nationwide? How are companies doing in addressing the issue?
Well, I think everyone in the corporate world knows that this is the right thing to do, but I think they have had problems in getting started, and some of the data that was just presented proving that it's actually good for business. I think we see in the utilization of employee assistance programs, which are the care that people often have available to them in corporations, the utilization rates are less than 10%, 5% of the people who have it, because guess what? They're afraid to go forward because of the potential for discrimination. I'm going to be put at the back of the line relative to promotions or treated as somehow not equal to the rest of my peers. So we've been at this for about the last 3 years to try to replicate what happened in the CEO Roundtable for Cancer, which Bush 41 put in place. Excuse me.
Water.
Yeah, somehow I got a frog in my throat. I think I can get through this. Here we go. All right, good. And that was to create a standard of behavior for corporations so they'd have some guidelines. So we created a charter of 8 principles that allow companies to adhere to a series of long-term commitments. And we make the CEOs of the companies who are engaged with us in this effort sign that charter, because it can't just be a short-term HR program, and B, it's got to be a long-term resource commitment for companies. So we're pleased to tell you now that we have over 2.2 million employees and hundreds of employers who are now signing up to this charter to go forward with this idea that we can make a difference, not in the short term, but in the long term, and celebrate the diversity of everyone in the workplace.
Yeah, and having them sign that piece of paper, I suppose, kind of holds people accountable.
And we don't let them in if they don't sign. I mean, there's a small membership fee, but that's the cost is really the cost of the total commitment of the corporation and allow that to happen.
Dr. Friedlander, in 2008, President George W. Bush signed the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equality Act into law. I remember I covered the White House then, and this was a big deal, right? This was going to change everything because it was going to put mental health on equal footing as physical health, so that insurance companies would have to cover both. Where are we in terms of that? Are we still, did it help, or are there more changes needed?
There's no doubt that more changes are needed. I can only speak for my corporation, for my employer. We were committed to mental health parity way before 2008, and that work has only accelerated. Benefit design is one of the primary drivers of what's accessible to employed individuals and their families. So the Parity Act goes far, but perhaps not far enough. I think it's the Parity Act as a scaffolding, as a framework, but there also needs to be attitudinal changes, societal changes, greater understanding by members of the public on how to access care, a recognition of what is available to them. Because when I take a look at our internal data, echoing some of the points that have already been made, only 8% of employees access any behavioral health services. And we know from the statistics that probably 20% of folks at any particular point in time actually have features of a behavioral health condition. So I think the Parity Act was a great step forward, but there are a whole lot of complex interacting factors that also need to be considered. For example, on the provider side, if we take a look at medical specialists, the dermatologists, the surgeons, approximately 90% of them, these are American Medical Association data, approximately 90% of them work with insurance companies. They'll accept a patient's
Can you say that number again?
90% of medical specialists. When it comes to psychiatry, it's about 50 or 55%.
Yeah.
If we talk about non-physician behavioral health practitioners, it's even lower. So when people take a look at the statistics and say, parity didn't go far enough, parity is still problematic because so many people have to go out of network to access behavioral health services, it's a little more complicated than that because it also is a question of participation. And it's not just parity ensures that the psychiatrists are paid exactly what a neurosurgeon would be paid in the same market for the same billing code, but it goes further than that. It's not just the reimbursement, it's the hassle factor, it's the difficulty of working with insurance, but there's also, in my opinion as a physician, an obligation that a physician has to his or her patient to say, I understand that you want to use your insurance to access services that you need. I need to figure out a way to make that possible for you.
Christopher, did you want to weigh in on that? I see you. Look, can I just say, as an employee, and I'll say this publicly, we have mental health issues in my family. We have psychiatry bills. It is really difficult. I live in New York, and I have a great job and a great insurance plan. It's not yours. But I bet everybody in this room can relate to the fraction of what is covered because I live in New York City and nobody takes insurance. I mean, most of the better doctors don't take insurance, and I have to file it myself, and then I have to go to my company to try to get reimbursed, and I get this much of what I've spent out of pocket. I think this is a global problem. What solutions do you have?
I want to address, the practical side of what you talked about, but yeah. I think also from a leadership side, as the doctor said, I mean, I think it's important that leaders of any organization know that their voice is powerful and can create change. And I think as CEOs or leaders, you could really do three things that really help the issue. One, I call it cultural change related to stigma and shame.
Yeah.
I mean, we've used that word already quite a bit this morning, but it's real. Second, I would say, to focus ultimately on education of individuals, education of employees, on what questions to ask, what resources are available, because sometimes they go underutilized. And then third, as a leader, you can provide resources that deal with prevention, treatment, and recovery. And if you take those things away and internalize them in any organization, I think you can develop good strategies. I'll give you two examples, just particularly dealing with shame and stigma, because that then frees up people, I think, to do more regarding education and seeking further information and getting help. We know the silence of shame is deafening as far as producing actions and outcomes. So we've taken on the personal obligation to talk about it. Talk about it with our 19,000 employees, either in town halls, blogging. I've written op-ed articles, about it. I've been on tours speaking about it because I'm pretty passionate about it and I know what's involved. But specifically, I could tell you culturally, we're moving the needle because unfortunately, one of our employees, a woman, just lost her nephew to an overdose, addiction overdose. And she said that the experience that she had with her supervisor, the company, the understanding, the empathy, just the responsiveness was wonderful. Compared to 10 years ago, when she lost a brother, family addiction, lost a brother, and it was like she was all alone. She didn't know who to talk to. She didn't, know how to really engage.
Huge difference in those years.
Huge difference over 10 years if you make it a priority. Second, I would say, particularly with our millennials, we call it just courageous conversations, right? I think the pastor talked about it this morning and the mayor about having the ability just to have an honest conversation. We're all human beings. We share a lot more than anyone realizes at times. But our millennial group is dealing with anxiety and depression due to work pressures, lack of maybe coping skills, wanting to get ahead. So in a small group setting, I mean, we could have an honest conversation about the treatment that they may need, tips that all of us go through in life to help manage that. But at least having the conversation and acknowledging it to your employee group, I think is very powerful. And I could tell you that our 19,000 employees are very proud of what we're doing as an organization, and they want me to continue to do more.
Yeah, I think, as the mayor said, it's seeing ourselves in each other. And we know with this issue, 1 in 4 Americans is directly touched by the opioid crisis. Either they know someone who is overdosed, they themselves are addicted, or they know someone who is addicted and currently struggling. So how do we see ourselves and each other and have an honest conversation about the issue? And for employers, they have to recognize that having an employee who is in treatment and doing well is good for their bottom line. They're more loyal, they stay longer, they are more productive, and their absentee rate is lower than everybody else's. So investing in good treatment for your employees and keeping them employed is the best thing that employers can do.
So Kate, I would just say that we interview the CHROs of the companies that are involved and share best practices, and clearly this whole idea of openness and the cathartic kind of thing that happens when the senior leaders of companies actually talk about their own personal conditions, my daughter or I personally, and that openness then leads to the opportunity for everybody else in the room. It's a cathartic kind of thing to say, okay, it's all right for me to now tell you my problems. And without that, this utilization rate, as he would describe, is often very low, and with it, there's a whole new attitude that comes forward to it. And I think the other important thing is the training of frontline supervisors on how to ask, are you okay? Because people know when people are really not okay, but they don't know what to do about it. You haven't come to work for the last 5 Fridays. I know you're not sick. What is it about your personal condition? Come on, be open, tell us about your depression. And once that happens, and then you know what to do about it, then you can make a difference.
I just did a story recently about police officers. I don't know if anyone saw it. It's on my Facebook page, but we went to Los Angeles. Yeah. And one of the things they do, because the rate of suicide among officers is higher than those who die on the job. So we all talk about police-involved shootings and things like that, but suicide is actually much more of an issue. And they have this program where the partners look out for each other. Yep. I mean, it's so obvious, but they're the ones on the front line that see their partner isn't showing up or isn't attentive or something's happening, and then they can tell. They have a way now, a mechanism to sort of flag a supervisor, and they have mental health support. I want to quickly, Garen, ask you about the depression cost calculator that you have, the One Mind initiative at work.
So much like the calculator that was mentioned earlier, we commissioned Tufts University to do a study on what are the true costs of just depression in the workplace and what are the opportunities to go forward with that. The net of all that is for every dollar that you invest in reducing the rates of depression through all of the programs we said, you get a $3 to $5 return. And if you think about that on the multiple of earnings that companies, shareholders value them, this is like a 10 to 20x return for everything that people do. But we created a calculator that will allow any employer in this room to go on our online, and it's published on the One Mind at Work website, and enter a few set of simple statistics, and you'll quickly be able to see what the bottom line costs of depression is in your workplace. And I can promise you it's a very powerful motivator for corporations to decide, to my earlier point, not only is it the right thing to do, but it's good for business.
Let me put it out to the rest of you. What are some of the best practices that you're seeing? What are some highlights and things that are working that we haven't mentioned yet?
You know, I'll mention one in particular. A couple of weeks ago, we held our Green Cross Gala, which is our safety awards program, and we gave our highest honor, safety and excellence, to Nationwide. Nationwide in Ohio has this great program where when an employee is impaired at work, they're not firing them. They're putting them in treatment. If they volunteer to go, they put them in treatment. They do monthly training of their supervisors and their managers, exactly what you're talking about, recognizing and how to have those kinds of conversations. Yep. And since they started their program in 2015, they've had a 100% success rate with those employees who have stayed in treatment for 2 years. So they're seeing really great results, 100%. And they're sharing their program freely, you know, through an organization in Ohio for any of the employers in the state who are looking to replicate it. That's a powerful program that's making a big difference. And those are the kinds of things we need to see rolled out, not just in Ohio, but across the country.
You know, the best practice that I would like to mention shows how the economics of this all play together. So if we're talking about opioids specifically, medication-assisted treatment is the gold standard. There's a ton of evidence in support of it. It is a best practice. And what we found when we took a look at folks that had an opioid use disorder who received medication-assisted treatment versus those with an opioid use disorder who did not receive medication-assisted treatment, we found very significant differences. So firstly, for the folks that did receive medication-assisted treatment, obviously their pharmacy costs went up by about $900 per patient per year. Their behavioral health costs went up about 150% because they were accessing the services. But overall, on the medical side, we saw $13,000 per patient per year savings because these folks were able to stay out of emergency departments, right, stay out of medical inpatient days. The first 3 months, their medical costs went up because suddenly they were engaged with the health system. They went and got their scans and their x-rays and went to visit their pain specialists. But at the end of 1 year, we saw $13,000 per patient per year savings. But when I go and meet with our provider community and encourage them to adopt medication-assisted treatment, there is still opposition. There still is this mindset of, I don't believe in this, despite the science. I think we really need to push, and you know, this is something that I work on every day. We really need to push, hey, if we're going to accept that behavioral health conditions are medical conditions, no different from diabetes or high blood pressure, we also have to hold our providers responsible and accountable for following evidence-based practice rather than carrying on doing what they've always done because that's what they like to do rather than this is what you need to be doing.
Christopher, you want to talk about the drug testing program? Am I right on that? Is there a program that you guys have developed?
What I want to talk to you
Go ahead.
about is similar. It's just program utilization, but maybe the context. The Hartford's a 210-year-old organization, and one of our operating strategies is to think in terms of we're a startup, and if you think about that, what does that mean? Data and analytics. So I think from a better practice, if not best practice, is in this whole area of addiction and mental health. What is the real data and showing in your employee group? I would say that we're a large organization, so we're self-insured, so we have our own data. We work with our pharmacy benefit manager. We have an employee assistance program. So we're able to triangulate on what is really happening health-wise, emotional and physical with our employees. Last 17 to 18, we noticed EAP utilization was up 30% across the board. 1 year. It's a pretty big jump. Through our employee surveys, through engagement, through dialogue, we determined that we needed to double the amount of days that we granted to our EAP program from 5 to 10. We changed the availability to use an out-of-network provider at in-network cost. Again, to get employees the resources they need to deal with some of the depression and anxiety that they're seeing. So that's just one example. I mean, I could go on particularly.
I think that's really a great example too of preparing or protecting the employee regardless of where they are in this situation, because the employee is not always the one who's addicted or who's battling, who's misusing the drugs. And so having a policy that supports the employee who might be caring for a husband or a wife or a child, but still has the flexibility, the time to be able to be off, who has the kind of coverage that supports them in a meaningful way is so important. And then I think to the point earlier about the stigma, really having an environment that would allow for an employee to come forward and say that they need help or say that one of their family members needs help and they feel supported in that space.
Last example, just data-driven, right? We've reduced over the last 5 years, the use of opioids in our workers' comp claimants by 45%. How? Data and analytics.
Is that, I think I misspoke before. I meant the drug review policy that you guys do. Is that?
A review policy? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I would say is that, one, you build a network of responsible prescribing doctors
Right.
that have good habits and good patterns. Two, we have about 300 clinical nurses that actually review, the script, prescriptions, for, use, right? What I've learned in this epidemic, the opioid, is that the medicine was developed for end-of-life treatment. It wasn't developed for, necessarily everyday use. So we have clinical nurses that are checking. We have clinical nurses that are, asking doctors and patients and dealing with ultimately, education on, the intended use. And ultimately, we've been able to drive down, as I said, 45% of that use over a 5-year period of time.
Kate, I think it's important we also understand that we really need more evidence-based treatments. I mean, we have most of our treatments and medications mitigate symptoms, but we're not talking about cures. We know a lot more now about diet, exercise. We know about the use of mindfulness and meditation. These are all things that are now augmenting it, but we have a long way to go in the research agenda for neuroscience in order to get to where we need to go. As a country, we spend about $8 to $10 billion on a problem that costs us $1 trillion. And so it's not, we've got to make this a national priority to really ramp up what we're doing, much like we did with heart disease, much like we did with cancer, and much like what we did with HIV. We don't have that national will yet, and all of us in this room can help get us there. Because
And is there a place for corporate America to contribute to the research effort? I'm sure there is.
yes, there is. The whole idea of public-private partnerships is really coming into play, and there are large-scale studies that we at One Mind are doing, and I think you're going to see them getting involved in the game. One of the healthcare providers, in fact, several of them have come to us and said, help us find more evidence-based treatments. What can we do? What research can we support? Because I think no one is in this to do evil. I think there's cost issues, but we just don't have good treatments to really help people come through where they are to where they want to be and lead the kind of productive lives they can.
I'm just going to ask, how are we on time? Sorry, I don't see a time clock, so I have no idea. 5 minutes, okay, thank you. I don't want to monopolize your time today. Can we leave then in the last 5 minutes? Can I have each of you give me the thing that gives you, I'll start with you, Christopher, and we'll go down the line, the most hope sitting here today? What gives you hope?
You could say groups like this. You could say the cultural change. You could say more honest, dialogue, engagement. I mean, you could make it self-serving, or you could make it, this is the right thing to do from a business side. It will help with employee retention. It'll help with productivity. It'll help with attracting talent in a very competitive world. I just see signs of hope, that we're coming together. Deaths are coming down. There's more people getting involved. I think there's less stigma that I could feel, even personally dealing with some family members that have dealt with addiction and mental health issues. It's okay to talk about. It's a fact. It's part of a human condition. Not everything's perfect in life, and you got to battle through it. I think we're more realistic about our expectations.
Yeah, I would just add on to that. I don't think a week goes by where there isn't a national story on this issue. I don't think a day goes by that my team isn't talking to someone about a policy issue or some way that it can be influenced. So I think the national dialogue is key. But what's really encouraging for us, because we have 15,000 member companies who belong to our organization, is that about 70% of them are asking for resources. They're asking for help. So that's promising because they recognize that there's an issue and they're asking us to help them work through it. And we are.
To me, what fills me with the greatest hope is the reforms that are occurring on the, in terms of reimbursement models. It used to be everything was fee for service. Now we're starting to migrate towards value-based reimbursement. And we see that starting on the medical side, and the medical folks realize that if someone has a co-occurring behavioral health condition, those medical expenses are going to be way, way higher. And because of that, they're starting to pay attention to how to incorporate behavioral health into the physical health component, particularly when they're at risk, when they're held accountable for some of the reimbursement of their health systems. So it's slow going, but that's what I'm most optimistic about.
So I'm an optimist, so I'm hopeful about many things. One of which is my son, Brandon, at 47, who has a very successful lived experience with his schizophrenia. And I see through him and the many people involved in the Stability Network, which is a network of people who are in the workplace doing this passion and this determination that we are not going to allow things to stay the same. We're going to move forward. And I think all of you in this room should be congratulated, the O'Briens and this Kennedy Forum. This is an example of a community coming together, raising the awareness, having the mayor say those kinds of things. We're going to hear from the mayor of New York City talking about Thrive New York City.
First Lady.
First Lady, yes. We're at a point in time where when Brandon got sick in 1990, I think we were like a -2 in terms of awareness. I think today we're up to a 3. So we have a long way to go. But the trajectory is right, and there's many other things that are coming forward, including a big documentary we're doing with Ken Burns that's, I think, going to change the landscape of awareness through PBS that we're starting to move forward with. So I'm optimistic, I'm hopeful, and because 70 is the new 50, you have a long way to go, all right? So there you go.
Well, I appreciate that. Ken Burns' documentary, that'll be, I mean, he hits everything out of the park. When is that going to come out?
We'll have to talk to you about that soon.
Okay. I interviewed Ken about a year ago for a series that I do called The Drink, where we have a drink and talk about how you got to where you are. He's fascinating.
Couldn't be, no one better could do this job, yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for leaving on a high note. And I share your optimism. This room is inspiring to me. My father-in-law took his life 9 years ago, and the difference that I see between then and now is, I mean, and that's just 9 years. Mm-hmm. I feel it. And I feel like I can say what I just said without anyone sort of looking at us strangely anymore. So thank you. Thank you all for being up here. I think I wrap it up from here. Yes? Okay, thank you. I'll be back later. Thank you so much.
It was great to meet you, Chris. Yeah, thank you. Look forward to working with you. Yeah. Thank you very much, Kate.
Thank you. It's really interesting. It's a little hard to.
Please welcome to the stage State Representative from Illinois' 12th District, Sarah Feigenholz.
How is everyone today? Let's give this panel a hand. They were fabulous. So, since we got here this morning, we have heard about how important it is to have business and health insurance be our partners in accessing mental health and substance abuse treatment, how to change the whole dialogue about this, and how much progress we've made even in the last 5 years since the birth of the Kennedy Forum. Everybody here, I know the board has noticed a sea change, but we have a lot more to do. So I'm in the General Assembly. I've been there a while, and we don't count after a certain number of years. One of the things that we accomplished in the General Assembly is we passed the most sweeping, broadest mental health parity law in this country. And many of my colleagues who are here in this room, we all rode in the same direction, and we were able to get this accomplished, and we have done so much more that you will hear about a little bit later in the afternoon. But we can pass as many laws as we want. But if they are not enforced, they mean nothing. So recently we did a really wonderful thing, and we elected Kwame Raoul as our Attorney General. Somebody who came up through the ranks in the Illinois Senate, just a great guy. And of course, all attorney generals around the country are now really starting to look at the whole issue of mental health parity and how well states are enforcing them. And we are looking to our attorney general to do the very same, to make sure that mental health parity is fully realized for the people in this state. Without any further ado, here's my buddy, Attorney General Kwame Raoul.
Well, good morning. You know, I was happy to get here in time to hear sort of the tail end of the panel, and some of the themes that came out of it for me. One of them was talk about it. Just yesterday, I started my morning at a men's healthcare event. It's Men's Healthcare Awareness Week, and I was on a panel with a local TV news personality who I've helped counsel over the past few months because he shares something in common with me. We are both prostate cancer survivors, and he was connected to me because I would talk about my experience. And I would not just talk about the physical experience. I would talk about the after effects of surgery and the mental health impact of surgery. And it's a very personal conversation that my partner at one point says, well, why are you speaking about it so openly? I said, because people need to know, because the healthcare system did not direct me into how to deal with the mental healthcare aspect of my experience. They told me everything about what to expect with my body. They direct me to the appropriate medication, but they didn't tell me what to expect in terms of my mind. And I was so happy that this very popular, TV personality came up behind me and spoke openly about the depression that you experience when you undergo this surgery. And I thought it was an important step in the right direction, because I don't think I or he would be able to do so even maybe 5 or 10 years ago. As Sarah mentioned, I spent a number of years in the General Assembly, and I was so lucky to serve along with her in the other chamber, and we partnered on many pieces of legislation. But I think one of the very last, if not the very last piece of legislation I was the sponsor of was the piece of legislation that Sarah talked about. To bring about mental health parity. But as Sarah mentioned, I decided to apply for a different job, and fortunately, many of you all here in the audience hired me to be the 42nd Attorney General of the state of Illinois. And one of the things, I get to sort of influence policy, but I don't get a vote. But I have a power of enforcement. I got together with my colleagues from throughout the country, state attorneys general throughout the country. We're collaborating more and more. Actually, for the first 3 weeks, I'll be leaving the state to get together with state attorneys general to discuss many issues. Last week, one of the top issues was the opioid crisis. And as we got into the discussion about metrics, if we ever come to resolution of keeping people accountable, there's a disparity in what different states have done in terms of addiction treatment. And comparatively, I still think we have a ways to go here in the state of Illinois, but we've done better than the vast majority of states. And some of the states were arguing, well, we shouldn't be punished because we have not invested in the treatment. And I said, well, why not? Why should you be rewarded for not having done so? We shouldn't wait till we resolve this fight to make that investment. It's imperative that we do so, and we do so comprehensively. As a father, as a cancer survivor who went through my own personal experience, I am dedicating to you that I will not only serve as a leader here in the state of Illinois, because I have recognized that as a state attorney general, I have an opportunity to impact what goes on in other states because we work collaboratively on a frequent basis. We have a weekly conference call of state attorneys general, the Democrats at least. However, we also meet on a bipartisan basis. And this is one of these issues that is not a partisan issue by any means. It's one of these issues that does not discriminate on party. It doesn't discriminate on geography. It doesn't discriminate on state lines. It doesn't discriminate based on gender or on race. It touches everybody. And since we recognize that, we need to continue to talk about it. We need to demand parity. And in my case, we need to look to enforce it. And I commit to you that that's what I'm dedicated to do. It doesn't mean anything for me to have sponsored a law that is recognized as one of the strongest, if not the strongest, mental health parity laws in the country if it is not enforced, and I'm dedicated to do so. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to the Attorney General for being here. It's nice to hear leaders making commitments, right? I would like to introduce now another committed public servant. She is a truly ambitious leader in the movement for mental health access for everyone. Nationally recognized as a powerful champion for mental health reform, she was Time Magazine's one of their 50 most influential people in healthcare for 2018. Shirlane McCray created Thrive New York City. It is the most comprehensive mental health plan of any city or state in the nation. Sorry, Chicago. I am very pleased to welcome First Lady of New York City, Shirlane McCray.
birthday. Hey, good morning, everyone. What an exciting time to be in Chicago. I want to thank the Attorney General. I really enjoyed his remarks, and congratulations to Mayor Lightfoot and the First Family. Please know that Chicago has a friend and partner in New York City. We're all rooting for you and can't wait to see what you all achieve. And of course, thank you to Patrick for bringing us all together with this forum and for your leadership in building a nationwide movement for mental health reform. So, since we're talking workplace mental health today, and I'm so happy to see this behind me, I want to ask all of you all, how often do you feel overwhelmed or stressed out at work? Let me see your hands. That's what I thought. That's what I thought. You're not alone. Gallup does this global survey of emotions every year, and their most recent survey found that Americans are among the most stressed out people in the world. We're in the top 10. And I don't know about you, but that's not a competition that I want to win. And that's what it feels like sometimes. It feels like it's a competition. We tend to wear our stress as a badge of honor, proof of how virtuous we are because of how hard we work. And here's the problem with that. Some amount of stress is normal, as you all know. It's healthy even. But when everyone around you is racing as fast as they can, it gets harder and harder to know when something's really wrong. And let me tell you a story. When my children were young, my mother-in-law's heart condition, it got worse over time. And around the same time, my mother was diagnosed with what was then considered a rare cancer called multiple myeloma. I was working full-time, and it felt like every second of the day was filled with care of the children, coordinating my mother's care, and all the paperwork that went with it. It was a ton of responsibility. And of course, my job didn't slow down just because all this was happening. I was locked in and doing everything that I could to keep it all together. And I had all of these very big feelings with no place to go. And do you know what that feels like? I see a lot of heads nodding. I mean, well-meaning people, and there were a lot of well-meaning people. Of course, my husband would suggest that I just, take it easier. Relax a bit. When? I had so much to do, thank you very much. So when I started feeling this pain in my stomach, I didn't do anything about it right away because it only hurt when I ate. So, I just ate a little less, right? And less to avoid the pain that I would get when I tried to eat. Obviously, I could not keep this up indefinitely. I finally went to a doctor, and he urged me to have an endoscopy and said he could do it right in his office. He showed me the operating table, it described the procedure, and mentioned that it would include anesthesia. I looked at him and said something like, "Yes, please, put me under. I want to sleep a long time." And it was just an offhand comment that it could easily have been laughed off. But the doctor, and I'll never forget this moment, he turned his head and looked at me, sharply with probing and concern in his eyes and asked me more questions about how I was really feeling. And we sat down and we had a long talk, and he eventually prescribed a short-term prescription for Paxil, a medicine that's used to treat anxiety and depression. Just to take the edge off, he said. But I was so taken aback. It was the first time, and I was in my 40s back then, it was the first time I ever thought that the stress and the exhaustion that I was feeling didn't have to be my everyday normal. And I don't think my experience was unique. You all saw those hands raised up in the air when I asked about stress. There's so many people who are overwhelmed with stress every day and just convinced that well, this is just the way it is. This is the world that we live in. This is how we've got to do this. They don't realize that it could be different, that they may have a condition that's treatable with exercise, meditation, therapy, medication, or some combination of all of those things. When people don't seek help, their symptoms can get worse over time. Employees become less productive and are more likely to miss work. And despite the obvious connections, many employers try to stay as neutral as possible when it comes to mental health. They provide some kind of insurance package, perhaps, and they feel like, okay, I've got that box checked. We're covered. But there is no neutral here. There is no neutral. If an employer is not actively promoting and supporting employee wellness, employees could be hurting unnecessarily. Mental illness and substance use disorders are not just personal problems to be dealt with off hours. They are human challenges, part of the human condition. And human beings don't stop being human beings when they clock in for the day. Somehow in this country, we've come to accept our jobs as a reasonable source of overwhelming stress. But we almost never think of the workplace as a great resource for wellness. We can change that, but every single one of us has to do our part. Some of you in this room represent organizations that have led the way, and I applaud you. But for many of us, this is a new frontier with a lot left to explore. Now, in New York City, we created Thrive NYC to actively promote mental health across our city and to reach New Yorkers wherever they are with support and services. That means connecting people to behavioral health care where they live, where they learn, where they worship, and of course, where they work. New York City has earned its reputation as a hard-working city. Most New Yorkers spend more than 60% of their time at work. And a study found that workers in New York City spend more time at their work than their counterparts in other cities. And that's true across different industries that you see. New York City is just all about the hustle. Am I right, Kate? Yeah, it's all about the hustle. And with so many people working so many hours, our economy is weighed down by the cost of untreated depression and substance use disorders to the tune of $14 billion, an estimated $14 billion in lost productivity every year. Now talk about a business case for mental health action. Now, we've got one. So launching Thrive was an important starting point because it began a long overdue citywide conversation about mental health stigma and access to care. As I traveled across the city to talk to people about their experiences with mental health and access, they also talked about work. I heard from people who couldn't find a therapist, who takes their insurance, and even those lucky enough to find care couldn't always get it right away. I heard from people who were too afraid to tell their supervisors that what they were going through. I talked to people who said that work didn't offer enough paid time off to properly manage their illness. Most people feel like the burden of getting care is all on them. And they're right. We don't have a functional, integrated behavioral health system in our country. So people who are sick, people who are not feeling well, have to jump through hoop after hoop just to navigate their own care, even when their condition might make that nearly impossible for them to do. It's like asking somebody with a broken leg to army crawl from place to place until they can find the right doctor to reset the bone. We would never do that, would we? And stigma adds to that burden. Mental illness is so difficult for people to talk about, especially at work where they risk losing their livelihood or missing out on promotions and growth opportunities. And we don't even know how to think about wellness and prevention. That's how far behind we are. So I want to ask you all to take a moment right now and turn to the person next to you and tell them just one thing that you're going to do this year to improve your physical health. Just one simple thing like going to the gym or eating less sugar. Can you do that? Turn to the person next to you. Okay. All done? All done? That was really good. You can stop now. Stop. Look how easy that was, right? Now I want you to turn to the same person and tell them one thing that you're going to do to improve your mental health. All right. All right. Now, you actually did better than I thought you were going to do. Much better than I thought you were going to do. But it did take you longer to get started with the second exercise. And I noticed that the buzz was definitely not as loud and prolonged. Now, maybe some of the clinicians in the room had an answer ready. But most of us didn't grow up thinking about strengthening and maintaining our mental health as a work in progress, the way we think about our bodies, the way we do with our bodies. That's why increasing awareness and understanding is a critical first step. New York City government workforce is the largest, with nearly 400,000 employees. Now that's a lot of awareness to raise. And we have just begun incorporating mental health into our internal communication strategies more than we ever have before. And as we move forward, all city workers will see positive educational messages about mental health and wellness on a monthly basis. But I have a confession to make to y'all. I usually ignore or delete those human resource emails. I bet some of you do too. I heard the laughter. Am I right? Yeah, of course we do. So here's my challenge to you. Over the next few months, actively engage with your employees, with your colleagues and staff members about how to really reach and engage employees, and share those ideas with the team responsible. In New York City, we're thinking about possibilities that include hosting town halls with leadership, hiring mental health coordinators at each of our agencies, and training volunteer mental health ambassadors to engage with their colleagues. We've already trained tens of thousands of teachers, police and corrections officers, and other frontline city workers in mental health first aid, which has been received very well. People are very enthusiastic about these trainings, and we're doing even more. But raising awareness is only the first step. The workplace can also play an active role in improving access to care and building resilience. They can pick up some of that burden their employees have been carrying all by themselves. That means training the managers to recognize the signs of mental illness and addiction, substance use disorders, and connect people to care. I found a mental health first aid course to be more useful in the workplace than any other professional development course I've ever taken. And right now, our public hospital system is piloting an exciting program. We rightly think of healthcare workers as heroes, but do we have enough built-in support for their emotional needs? How do the doctors and nurses feel after losing a patient? What about the workers who clean the rooms after someone has died, or the administrator who has to meet with the families? Peer navigators are now available to talk them through that trauma. And we're thinking about what that could mean for a whole host of city workers. Just last week, we tragically lost 2 members of the NYPD to suicide within a 24-hour period. And I know you've had experiences here in Chicago with that in the last several months. As our cities mourn their families, it is the right time to ask, what more can we do for those who experience trauma on the job? Not only police officers, but firefighters, healthcare workers, teachers, and social workers. Every field and industry is different, with its own set of risk factors and opportunities. For example, we know that the suicide rate is highest among construction workers nationwide. And because New York City taxi drivers were preyed upon by lenders at the same time as their entire industry was upended, They have experienced extreme financial stress and more suicides as well. Nonprofits tend to employ people who work long hours for little money. And fast-paced worlds like finance and media demand high performance under high pressure. Is there any industry that's immune from mental health challenges? Anyone? No, I don't think so. With all the industry differences, a cookie-cutter approach won't work. And we have so much to learn from one another. But we also know the government can play a role in changing workplace culture. And because of that, we've launched a new public-private partnership called Thrive in the Workplace this year. We will partner with 100 organizations from the highest stress fields, not just the Fortune 500 companies, but minority and women-owned enterprises, small businesses, and nonprofits as well. We will help them increase awareness, improve access to care, and build resiliency. Our Thrive team will collaborate closely with employers to guide them through the process of assessing the specific needs of their workplace, setting goals, and implementing new strategies and innovations. And everything we learn through these partnerships, we will apply to our own gigantic workforce. My hope is that other cities will be able to replicate this model, or at least parts of it. And we can't afford to wait. Some of you may remember that 1 year ago, almost to the week, Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain took their lives within a few days of one another. The effects of those tragedies rippled through the country, especially in New York City, where they spent so much of their lives. Just over a month later, the Kate Spade Company held a mental health day for employees and invited me in to speak. And let me tell you, the loss was still so raw. And I could feel it. What a contrast. What a contrast those sober young faces were sitting against the backdrop of these colorful, bright Kate Spade bags on the wall, on display. The staff members in that room were so quiet, it was breathlessly quiet as they focused on the conversation that we were having. And after I spoke, some women came up to me, and one of them said she had never heard anyone speak so openly about suicide and mental health before. And this was a workplace, of course, that had just experienced such a terrible loss. There is so much at stake here. And I want to ask you to please close your eyes for a minute and imagine with me. Close your eyes. Imagine if workplaces led open conversations about mental health without a tragedy to spur it. Imagine if people could navigate their care with the understanding and support of the organization that they work for. Imagine if every workplace made it their mission to strengthen employee resilience and wellness and live their lives with dignity. You can open your eyes now. We can do this. We can do this if we all make it a priority. So let's start today. Can we do that? I said, can we do that? Can we do that? Yeah, we can do that. I know we can. We can do it. And I want to thank you all for your leadership and commitment to the health and well-being of all the people that you work with. Let's get to work.
Thank you so much, First Lady McCray. That was inspiring. And I want to thank our incredible panelists from earlier, the speakers all morning long. I don't know about you guys, I think it's been really energizing already to hear from all these inspiring people and to hear specific stories about things that people are doing, dynamic things that are creating change. So we're going to prepare for the breakout sessions now. And I want to make sure that everybody knows where they're going. So I'm in charge of telling you where to go next. Okay, so the breakout sessions are, as you probably know, your opportunity to get into more nuanced conversations about the topics that we've discussed this morning already, about tough questions. You can reflect critically. You can take advantage of the opportunity to be a student. You can take notes. Breakouts are going to be from 10:45 to 11:45, followed by lunch in Gar Hall. After lunch, we're going to jump right back into our afternoon breakout sessions. Those go from 1:15 to 2:15. To 2:15. And then at 2:30, we're going to meet back here at the main stage. Here are the room locations for the breakout sessions that are happening right now. But if you get lost, if you have any questions, just look at your program, or you can ask one of the friendly volunteers around. Human-centered HR, fighting stigma to create a supportive work environment for all. That's going to be the 5th floor in the Washington room. Bridging the Gap, a policy-driven smart business approach to health insurance and EAPs. That is in the Claudia Cassidy Theater. First responders, trauma-informed approaches to serving those who serve. That's right here in the main stage. You don't need to go anywhere. Just stay here. Move up to the front, please. The Inspired Classroom, addressing the social emotional needs of our educators. That will be on the 5th floor in the Garland room. For the breakout session locations following lunch, the second session, you can find that in your program. Just a couple of final housekeeping items before I lose you all. This is important. There are charging stations outside in the hall, so you can keep tweeting. Nobody? You can keep tweeting. You can keep on, okay, thank you. By the way, it's hashtag Kennedy Forum 2019, okay? Barbara's Bookstore is with us again, managing our bookstore out in the lobby. Many of today's speakers, including Patrick Kennedy, are signing their books. So you can stop by during lunch if you're interested in meeting the speakers and buying the books. They'd love that. And I want to remind you, you are in this beautiful Chicago historical venue. After lunch, we encourage you to talk and meet with folks or practice some self-care. You can walk around the space. You can check out our wellness space. Of course, we have a wellness space here today. It's sponsored by Haymarket Center, and it's in Gar Hall. Is it Gar or G-A-R? I'm not sure. Gar Hall. So enjoy your breakout sessions, and remember, we'll meet you back here at 2:30. Thanks.